Hello, I'm Acharya DharmAnanda, and I will be speaking to you today about the three trainings of Buddhism. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Now, what the three trainings of Buddhism are basically the basis of the entire, what you might consider the entire meditation practice itself. That's what it's actually considered within the suttas and the teachings of the Buddha. They're also talked about as the basis of the entire Buddhist path, not just meditation. The Buddhist path is primarily about the meditation, but it deals with also living your life as well. So living a holy, pure life, as well as developing a holy and pure mind and meditation, both of those together are the totality of the Buddhist path itself. So these three trainings, they are called, first there is Sila, which is morality. There is Dana, which is generosity. And then there is Bhavana, which is mental development. And those are all three of the trainings that put together equal the entirety of the Buddhist path itself. Now first, I'll be talking about Sila. The reason that Sila, or morality, the reason that morality is actually placed first is not just a matter of importance, but also a matter of the training itself. Morality is basically considered both the first and the last training because from the moment you're born till the moment you die in this lifetime, you are constantly developing morality. Actually, also, if you want to go on a greater scale and think of it in terms, if you choose to believe in rebirth, like Buddhism does, it's the from the moment you came into being in whichever lifetime, multiple eons ago, till the moment you attain full and complete enlightenment, get off the wheel of samsara or suffering, and attain final nibbana. Once you die within your final lifetime, you're continually developing morality. And so this is the first training you begin to develop, and it's the last training you will be developing at the moment that you get off the wheel of samsara. And because of its importance there, and also the real subjectivity people want to give to it, whereas they might choose that it can be more important or less important, or it doesn't really have to be followed as closely, because they want to give it some sort of ambiguousness about how to be practiced based upon their own personal desires and craving. I'll be spending the longest with this training, and I'll also be reading two separate teachings of the Buddha directly word for word, so that you know that what I'm speaking about with regard to morality is not just my own words. That's what the Buddha himself taught as well. Okay, so first off, with morality, there are 5 basic precepts that everyone who actively practices Buddhism is encouraged to follow. Of course, it's not necessary for anyone to follow these. The problem is, though, that if you don't follow them, it's not that someone, there's God sitting up somewhere waiting, looking down on you with some condescending stare, waiting to throw a lightning bolt at you if you break these precepts or you don't follow the precepts at all. But there will be an underlying guilt and remorse that will actually hinder your meditation practice or your bhavana, your mental development, that will keep you from being able to actually follow the Buddhist path and reach the culmination of it, which is final and complete liberation from suffering here and now, that allows you to reach final nibbana or final nirvana when you pass away. And so with that, the 5 basic precepts that everyone follows, they are, first, to refrain from intentionally harming or killing any living being. That's not just humans, not just large animals like cows, deer, dogs, cats, etc., but that also means small animals, ants, mosquitoes, common housefly, fleas, etc. And you kind of think, a lot of people think, well, those are just pests. We've got to get them out of their house. How do you get them out of their house without spraying Raid everywhere or calling the exterminator? Well, there are various topical botanical ways that you can do that. With cockroaches, they don't like the smell of cucumber. So you can actually chop up a cucumber, put it in a plate where you find that the roaches are coming into your home, and you leave it there, and they will actually leave. And if you do it long enough, roaches won't come back around to your home at all. You have to do it for an extended period of time, but still it works. Spiders dislike the smell of peppermint oil, so you can mix peppermint oil with water, put it in a spray bottle, and spray it around your door frame or wherever you find spiders coming into your home, and they'll leave. There are various recipes online to make botanical mosquito repellents that repel mosquitoes without killing them. There are various botanical options for fleas, etc. My wife and I, we actually go to the vet and we get a medication for our dogs that it's basically supposed to kill fleas, but our dogs never had fleas in the first place. So if your dog doesn't have fleas, it actually repels them, so they don't even try to attach and can die. There's not really much of a botanical way to protect our dogs from that, and that's actually a self-defense mechanism, because of the fact that there's no real botanical way that actually is a long-term lasting thing. We have to use that, or else it could kill our dogs. So that's kind of the difference there. Intentionally harming and killing living beings, I change that to, whenever I repeat it, I say I make the determination to keep the precept to refrain from intentionally harming or killing living beings except in self-defense. I don't try to kill living beings in self-defense. I do what is necessary to stop that being from harming me. If it takes smacking a dog across a dog that's trying to attack me across the nose to get him to run away, then I'll do that. If it takes me just stamping and yelling at the dog to get him to run away, then I'll do that. It's only to the extent that is necessary. And whereas, such as with like our dogs, we give them we put the topical on them, and it repels fleas. If they already had fleas, it would kill the fleas in the eggs, but they don't have fleas in the first place. So it repels the fleas and keeps them from attaching to them. So that way it doesn't really kill any of them. And then, like, if a person attacks you, you do what is necessary. You do go to the extent necessary to get the person to stop attacking you. If it requires you to smack someone, then you do so. The Buddha even talks about this because there are rules for the monks and the nuns within the Buddha Sangha, beyond just the basic 5 precepts. Monks have, I think it's 227 precepts, I believe, and nuns, they have like 252 or something like that, because they need a few more precepts because of their anatomy, the female anatomy, and things with regards to hygienic stuff. And then also during the Buddha's time, women were seen as second-class citizens, so certain things they needed to do to protect themselves from being subjugated by men or possibly raped by men and things like that. So they needed a few more rules. But in the Vinaya for monks, the Buddha actually has a Vinaya rule about harming another person, and says not to smack or hit or injure someone except unless you're defending yourself. And even then, only do it to the extent necessary to permanently stop that person from harming you. And so that's what I actually changed the first precept for myself that I repeat to be that way, so that way it's okay to do what is necessary to defend yourself and the people you care about, but you only do it to the extent necessary. You never intentionally harm anybody. I don't try to intentionally hurt someone. If I end up having to hurt someone to stop them from injuring me or from injuring my wife or someone else, then I'll do only what is necessary. If it takes just smacking the person, or pushing them down, then I'll do that. But only if they have attacked first. I never will attack someone preemptively. And I never harbor thoughts in my mind of trying to injure or hurt or kill someone. And I never do, and hopefully I've never have, and hopefully never will have to kill another human at least. And then this, with the self-defense aspect, it also adds to, if you have a parasite, that needs to be taken care of. That's harming you. That could possibly kill you. You need to deal with that. And there's also a story of the Buddha where he dealt with one of his disciple monks. That monk developed psychic abilities and could see all the small beings, microscopic beings on the ground that he was potentially stepping on and killing every time he took a step. So he would stop taking, even just walking, he'd just stand still. And he saw inside of his body that his bodily functions were killing all these microscopic organisms inside of his body. So he did everything he could to stop breathing and stop all of his bodily functions. And the Buddha walked up, saw this and walked up to him and asked him what he was doing. And the monk told him, and he said, well, that can't be helped. Living beings are living and dying just as the fact that you're alive. So, you can't do that. You just try not to intentionally harm or kill something, because like your bodily processes are causing microscopic organisms to live, to be created and to die just because of the fact that you're living and that your bodily processes are going on. So, you only do it like if you see a mosquito on your arm and it's, you just brush it off and do what you can to get it to go away, but you don't smack it and kill it. If you see an ant on you, you brush it off. You don't try to squish it. If there's a flea, you brush it off. You don't try to kill it. If you have a tick on you, you get the tweezers and you try to pop it off without breaking its head, pulling its head off and killing it. And there are various botanical things that can cause you to repel those, can help you to repel those pests and those parasites from biting on you as well as biting on other beings, to keep from killing them. So that's with that. You do not intentionally harm or kill another living being except in self-defense, period. And that is the Buddha's teaching on that. Now the second precept, that is to refrain from taking that which is not given, or stealing. You do not steal anything, period. If someone did not hand it to you or freely give it to you, then you do not take it. With the exception, you find something on the ground and nobody's there. If you found like money on the ground and nobody's around anywhere, then that's technically that's not, well, actually, period, that's not stealing, because you don't know whose it is. If you saw somebody drop it on the ground and you pick it up and put it in your pocket and say, well, it's mine now, then that is stealing, because you know who dropped it. That should be, with that, you pick it up and you say, hey, you dropped this, here you go. But yeah, if you see something on the ground, an item, object, money, whatever, and you don't see anyone around, you don't see anybody it could have obviously dropped from or what have you, then that's not stealing. Okay, it just means that if you know who the person was that it dealt with, or there's some possible way to find out who it was, you do the best you can to find out who that thing, that item, object, whatever belonged to give it back to them. And of course, if you can't, and you've waited a certain amount of time, you have to wait before you can claim it, then that's not stealing and that's okay. But it extends to taking pens from work, taking monies from coworkers, taking items from coworkers. There's a habit. It's kind of a bit of a cliche, I guess, or a stereotype of the workplace refrigerator in the workplace break room, where people, they just find food in there and they just eat it, whether it's theirs or not. They're like, I don't have to bring food to work. There's going to be some random thing in there I can just pick out from somebody. Nobody's going to miss it. Well, that person does. They'll come back later and they're like, hey, where's my food? That's stealing. Because that belonged to somebody that, it did not belong to you. It belonged to someone else, and you decided to take it anyways. If there is food in there and, somebody gives it to you, then that's different. Somebody's freely given that food to you. So yes, do not steal. Now the third precept is to refrain from sexual misconduct. What that means is any type of sexual activity that harms another being. That means, in general, if you are in a relationship with someone, or you're married, something like that, you don't have a romantic relationship or sexual activity with someone who is not the person that you're currently in a relationship with, someone who is not your current mate. If someone else has a mate and you know it, if they're in a if they're in a relationship, or they're married, then you don't have sexual activity or a romantic relationship with that person. And it also means you don't have sexual activity or a romantic relationship with someone who is currently under the care of their parents, or is not, and is not mentally or emotionally capable of having a healthy romantic and sexual relationship. Such as, and this is an extreme case, you're 20 years old and you wouldn't have sex with a 14-year-old. Or even technically a 17 or 18-year-old, someone who might be closer to your age, but is still under the care of their parents. Once they graduate high school, move out or whatever, then that's okay. And that actually extends also to cultural laws, because the Buddha said we had to follow our cultural laws, because like in India at the time during the Buddhist time, polygamy was okay. It was culturally and legally accepted. Excuse me. So that's one thing. In a country where, you're 20 years old and you get an arranged marriage to someone who is 16 or 17, then that is legal and that's technically okay. There are certain instances where that would not be okay, such as grown men being married to 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old girls. That, even if that might be accepted by the culture and is legal by the culture, that is still causing harm to that young girl, because it is medically known that it causes physical pain for girls of that age to have sexual activity, not beyond the first time. And the main purpose of that is older men trying to procreate and have as many children as possible with the woman, and the younger she is, the more children she can bear. And at that young age, their physical bodies aren't capable of having healthy pregnancies. They can have children, but it can actually do serious physical harm to their bodies, and will actually lessen their lifespans, and will cause serious internal damage to them. So it's still not okay. It still causes suffering and harm to those girls. Other things are, sexual molestation, which is technically just something that we talked about, but in the essence of it being illegal, not just a culturally accepted thing, such as in some countries where it is accepted, but also, here in America and most other developed countries where sexual molestation is illegal. You don't do that. Don't do any type of forced sexual activity beyond molestation, such as rape to adult women who might be closer to your age, or younger, or older, whatever. You don't do that. You don't basically any type of sexual activity that might cause physical or emotional or mental harm to someone, including yourself, is a part of this precept. Okay, that's sexual. Any of that is sexual misconduct. Now that still leaves the door open for a lot of other things that may not necessarily get into here. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't have sex with someone you're not married to. You can have a monogamous, premarital relationship and still be able to have sex with that person. It's not sexual misconduct. You can, you can still have, sex with yourself, masturbation, things like that. That's technically not considered sexual misconduct unless you choose for it to be. If you have an addiction to those things, or it's necessary for you to watch pornography or anything that might be causing harm to the person that's on the video, whatever. Things of that nature. If there's an excess of that thing that causes a lot of craving and a lot of unrest in your mind, a great deal of lust in your mind, then that is equal to sexual misconduct, and that might be something you might want to look at putting a halt to. It all depends on what's going on there, because of course there are numerous situations that are not considered sexual misconduct by the essence of this precept that might be on a case-by-case basis be considered sexual misconduct because of a person's addiction to it and the hindrances that are coming up in their mind whenever they do it. Of course, there are hindrances to a certain extent with any type of sexual activity, but if it causes an incredible amount of lust in your mind, that is basically causing your thoughts to constantly tend toward that, then that might be something that needed to be looked at with stopping to keep those hindrances from arising. This also means sexual misconduct also means not to solicitate prostitution as well, to either be a prostitute or to solicit prostitutes as well, because that causes harm to the people, because many prostitutes, some might prefer that lifestyle, but the majority, they tend to have resorted to that lifestyle because there was nothing else for them. And it causes pain and suffering whenever they have to do that, even though that's the way they make money. And then also it's typically a purpose of lust that people solicit prostitutes as well. Which is a bunch of causes suffering in their own minds. So not soliciting prostitution helps to attenuate the lust within your mind that might cause you to tend toward that activity. So after that, we move on to the fourth precept. That is to refrain from intentionally lying or using harsh and divisive speech. And that is actually the entire precept. You can also add slanderous speech in there, which a lot of the language of the precepts do, intentionally lying or using harsh, divisive, or slanderous speech. But I just shorten it down because divisive speech is a part of slanderous speech as well. And that is actually the thing. It's not just speech misconduct or incorrect speech. It is intentionally lying or using harsh and divisive speech. That's actually the full language of the precept once it's translated into English. And with this, that means any type of intentional lying. If you say something that you know is not true, but you say it anyway, that is lying. If you say something that you think is true, but turns out to be not true later on, but you didn't know it at the time you said it, that's not lying. You actually just said something incorrect that you thought was correct at the time. And just once you're corrected, you just correct yourself and you let the person know that you might have said the incorrect information to. Hey, look, I told you this bit of information, and at the time I thought it was correct. But after the fact, I found out that it was incorrect, so I'm sorry. Here's the correct information. That happens to me sometimes at work. I work at a grocery store, and sometimes I might tell a customer that we do have an item because at the last time I checked the information, we did have it, but we no longer have it on the shelf because it's been discontinued or it's been taken off the shelf because it didn't sell very well or something like that, and I find out after the fact. So I have to go find the customer and let them know, hey, I'm sorry, we did have this product, but I found out that we no longer carry it, for whatever reason. So that happens to me a lot of the time, and that's not lying because I did not know at the time I told them the information that it was not true. I thought that it was true based upon the information that I had at the time. Now with using harsh speech, that means any type of harsh speech. That means calling people names, calling people any type of names, cursing, just period. That is harsh speech. That's all harsh speech. And now why would that be in here? Because using that speech means there's some type of underlying aversion in your mind. And that underlying aversion will cause restlessness whenever you're in meditation doing your mental development. And also, if you call people names, that causes the person that you call the name to take something personally. And that causes them suffering as well, which causes an underlying remorse that also causes restlessness in your mind while you're doing your meditation and just in general while you're living out your life. Now using divisive speech, intentionally lying or harsh and divisive speech. Now divisive speech, that is slanderous speech. That's any type of speech you use to divide other people. Where if you go to this, let's say you have two friends, and for whatever reason you don't want them to like each other, want to cause drama or something like that. So you go to this one friend and say, hey, I heard this person was talking about you and saying this, and you basically lie and tell them something that might not be true, or you tell them something that is true, but it's not necessarily something that should be said. The only options with that would be if you heard your one friend say, hey, I'm planning on hurting this person or stealing from them or something like that. Then that's an option where you do, no matter what, you need to tell your friend and say, hey, look, this other guy over here, he or she or whatever said that they're going to steal from you or they're going to hurt you. They're going to do something to cause something that's illegal to happen to you. That's an exception to this rule. But primarily it means something that you do that the person said something that doesn't necessarily going to hurt that person because it's them just being mad and being an outlet for their aversion. But you decide to tell this person anyways to stir up trouble. So if somebody says or doesn't say something and you tell that other person that and they get angry, and then you go back and tell the other person, hey, this person said this or that at you, whether it's true or not, and you try to get them to fight with each other. That's slanderous, divisive speech. This also extends to gossiping. That is both with lying and divisive speech. Because typically gossiping is making up stories about someone. You may not know if it's all true. It might be a true story that people didn't know all the details to. There were holes in the story that they didn't know because they didn't hear the entire thing, so they decided to make up things to make the story complete. And so they go telling people about that, such as, for example, you see your neighbor's house burn down, and everybody starts talking about all the stuff that was in it, that could have been in it, that's being burned down, or what may have happened, or I bet that person burned down their house to get insurance money or whatever. That is all gossip, because you don't know what happened. And even if you did, why go spread the story around? It may not be necessary. That's gossip, and that's harsh. That's lying and using harsh and divisive speech, typically all rolled into one. Now, after intentionally using lying or using harsh and divisive speech, we're going to the fifth and final precept, which is to refrain from using intoxicating drinks and drugs which lead to a lack of mindfulness. And this is a big hot button topic for a lot of people, especially in our day and age and our culture, where going to the bar, coming home, kicking back a cold one at the end of the day, to take the edge off, or having some wine with dinner to chill out from the day, or whatever, to wind down, is kind of a bit of the norm for a lot of people. I'm not going to say for everybody, because not everybody does it, but that's a lot of the norm. And I see it a lot at work. There's very few people who are of the legal age to buy alcohol that come through my store. About 3/4 of those people, they typically are coming through with some sort of alcoholic item. And the thing with this is that one who practices Buddhism should refrain from doing that if they're actively practicing Buddhism, working toward attaining enlightenment. And the reason for that is that alcohol dulls your mind. It dulls out your mind. It causes you the tendency to break the previous 4 precepts also. And a dull mind equals an inability to meditate. One of the 5 hindrances is sloth and torpor, which means sleepiness or dullness of mind. So having a dull mind is not conducive to meditation, and you're supposed to take your meditation practice with you and work towards being mindful at all times of the day, regardless of whether or not you're sitting on your meditation cushion or wherever you choose to do your regular daily sitting practice. You're supposed to try to take your meditation with you. So you can't really do that if you're having a dull mind from drinking alcohol. And this also goes with recreational drugs as well. Some of those tend to dull out your mind, such as marijuana. Some of them actually agitate your mind, such as cocaine or speed. People do them to escape from the world and to, quote, take the edge off the day. But they dull your mind out or they agitate it, which causes either dullness of mind or restlessness of mind. They keep you from being able to be mindful. And even some people, they, especially college students, they tend to take some sort of amphetamine, such as Ritalin, or something like that, that's used for kids who have ADHD, to be able to focus and study for tests, especially if they're trying to cram, because they may have been slacking in their studying earlier in the semester. But the thing is, with that, that's still an amphetamine. That actually doesn't really, that increases your focus for a certain amount of time, but it's basically causing restlessness that causes you to have a focus on your object. That's keeping you from being mindful as well. Because a one-pointedness of mind, or a focused concentration, is also a lack of mindfulness too. Because mindfulness, it means being aware of your surroundings and aware of what's going on in your mind. Most people, there's not really a definition of mindfulness. Mindfulness is sort of like the term God. Everybody's supposed to know what it is, know what it means, but nobody actually has a definition for it. A good definition that one of my teachers gave me is that mindfulness is being aware of the movements of your mind from moment to moment. That means being aware of what's happening in your mind in the present moment. And for example, if you're walking to your car, going from work, or going to the store, or leaving your house for whatever, what are you doing with your mind? Are you thinking just random nonsense thoughts? Or are you, focusing on loving kindness, focusing on loving yourself, focusing on sending out loving and kind thoughts to other beings? If you're at the grocery store and you're in line, are you just thinking like the majority of other people do? And I work at a grocery store, of course, and check out people all the time, and I can see it on their faces. They're all just sitting there like, yeah, I want to hurry up and get out of here, why is it taking so long, etc. Are you doing that, or are you wishing loving and kind thoughts to the people in line with you? Are you wishing loving and kind thoughts to the person who's checking you out? Because, they might feel hassled, kind of, because they've dealt with some people that might have had negative attitudes. I know I live in a resort town, and we're currently in our summer season, which is our busiest season. We're constantly breaking sales records left and right. And we're so busy sometimes that, we never get away from wherever we're working at, such as the register, or I tend to work at the customer service desk. You're rarely ever moved from one spot. And this also increases the number of disgruntled customers we have, because they're tired of waiting in line. They're tired of spending all this time, having to get around these people. So the moment that something inconvenient for them happens, where a price is incorrect, or they went to the deli or the seafood department and they were supposed to get this particular item, and it was either the wrong item, or it was entered incorrectly, so it's not the correct price, then they get really aggravated and agitated. And so they start getting, disgruntled, and they will yell and curse. And, I just had something like that happen last night, even while I was at work. Actually, not last night, it was yesterday. I worked a morning shift, so it was yesterday afternoon, early in the afternoon, where I had an issue like that happen. And what I did to help diffuse the situation was like I'd always do, but usually I'm not doing it directly at a person. I basically directed, and I don't force loving kindness on someone. It's sort of like a candle flame. The candle flame, lets out the light and the warmth indiscriminately. It doesn't try to force it out. It's just there. It's just being a candle flame. So that's kind of what you do, and that's what I did, and I just, sent loving and kind thoughts to that gentleman and helped to diffuse the situation, so he wasn't, because he started getting really irate and was starting to raise his voice. But, I diffused the situation. I sent loving and kind thoughts to him, and I said, sir, I'm really sorry about this. We'll get this fixed. I'll call my manager up here. You can let him know what's, your aggravation about this, so we can work to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And that helped to diffuse the situation. He calmed down a little bit. He was still a bit aggravated, but he left with a smile on his face. We were able to make him happy before he left. So that's really what mindfulness is. And as I said, taking recreational drinks and drugs, they dull your mind out and they keep you from being mindful like that. And you can't really do that very well. And I'll give you another aspect too. This is a really good one. This is another personal thing of mine that happened to me. like going to the dentist office. Nowadays, everybody hates going to the dentist, and they'll even offer to give you nitrous or laughing gas to keep you from being worried about them cleaning your teeth even, because that's how nervous people get. Um, and it was actually about 2 years ago, almost about a year and a half to 2 years ago. I went to the dentist. It'd been the first time in several years, just because I hadn't had insurance and dental insurance, and been able to afford to go to the dentist. And I finally got it with my current job. And my wife and I set up to have our teeth cleaned at the same time. And they asked me if I wanted nitrous, and I said no. I declined nitrous because, of course, that's against the precepts, the Buddhist precepts, and would cause me not to be mindful. And they cleaned my teeth and checked my teeth out, did the x-rays, whole 9 yards, all that stuff. And it turns out, I've never had my wisdom teeth removed. They're still there. And one of my wisdom teeth was actually impacting, down here in my bottom left side, was actually impacting against my regular teeth, and actually caused my gum to fold up over one of my teeth. That was causing food particles and tar and things to build up in there, and I couldn't clean it properly, and it had caused decay there. And so the dentist said if I didn't get any of my other wisdom teeth removed at the time, I needed to get that one removed. And so I set up an appointment to get to get the wisdom tooth removed. And it was the way it was sitting was it was actually sitting sideways in my mouth. And it was a very complicated way to get it out. The dentist was going to have to cut open my gum and remove the gum part, flip it over, and he was actually going to have to break the tooth into pieces, to drill through the tooth and break it into several pieces to be able to remove it. So the doctor, they again asked me if I wanted nitrous with that, and I declined. I, of course, allowed them to have the Novocaine, the painkiller, because, that's just common sense. This does not mean drugs that lack common sense. The Novocaine actually just numbs you. It doesn't really affect your mindfulness or anything, and so that's not a big deal. And of course, it's just common sense, because that's real pain there, and the Novocaine, that actually helps to make things smoothly with regard to the procedure. So I told them, okay, go ahead and give me the Novocaine and all that. And so they put the Novocaine into my gums, and they were supposed to get it all the way down to the nerve of my tooth to numb the tooth as well, so I wouldn't feel the tooth breaking. Well, they got it down into the gums, and they were able to cut up the gum fine. I didn't feel anything, but they didn't get it all the way down to the root. And of course, the dentist told me that if I felt any pain, to let him know, so that he could put more Novocaine in there to make sure that the root of the tooth was numb. And I didn't say anything. And he actually started drilling into the tooth, and I actually felt it. And the Novocaine did not get all the way to the root. But instead of letting the dentist know, I thought, I was being mindful at the time, and I thought, this is a real good time to practice my mindfulness. Because I'd heard of a story like this from one of my from one of my meditation teachers, where he had done his mindfulness practice while getting a root canal because a dentist was cleaning his tooth and chipped his tooth. And he was in Burma, and they don't clean their instruments very well, so he didn't want to risk getting AIDS. So he wasn't going to have them give him Novocaine, because there was no way to properly clean the needle that they give him the Novocaine with. So he made sure that the dentist cleaned all the other instruments that it was going to use, such as his drill and things like that. But he said not to give him any Novocaine. And the thing with the mindfulness is, if you do the mindfulness practice properly, as the Buddha talks about, which I'll actually read one of the Buddha's teachings directly, so it's not just my own words about the meditation practice. You can actually, whenever you do that and you don't tense up with the pain, you actually relax your mind. You do a physical relaxation of your mind, basically. And whenever you do that, it actually allows your pineal gland, like basically your third eye gland in the center of your brain, to open up. And that pineal gland is actually where your endorphins come from. And your endorphins are your body's natural painkillers that are 10 times stronger than morphine, and they don't affect your mindfulness. Once he started drilling in and I could feel that, I thought about that. And I'm like, well, this is a good time to practice my mindfulness and to relax and to actually see from personal experience whether or not this works. Because the Buddha is all about experience. There's an entire sutta just about that. That the Buddha says, don't even trust what I say. Just look at what I taught, put it into practice, and if it causes suffering to you or anyone else, don't do it. But if you put it into practice and it causes you and everyone else around you to be happy, then keep it going. And so that's what I was going to do. I was going to practice it, and if for whatever reason the pain was too much for me to bear, or I couldn't take it because the practice wasn't working, then I'd let the dentist know and say, hey, I need some more Novocaine. So I started doing that, and I started relaxing, and I noticed when my body was getting tense, or I was gripping the seat, or my back was tensing up, or my jaw was tensing up, anything like that, and I would relax my mind and my body, and I actually noticed that there was a noticeable decrease in pain. And the pain, whenever it started out, was extremely intense, very intense pain. And he drilled through my tooth, and once he drilled into my tooth a certain way, he had this little L-shaped bar that he actually would put into the area, it was basically a track that he drilled into my teeth, and he put it in there, and he would start turning it to the side to break my tooth. And so I could feel that, all of that, and it was very intense pain. And once I started doing my relaxation, the pain started to lessen. It didn't go away all the way, and it didn't even lessen half of the way. Let's just say if the pain was an 8 or a 9, it probably lessened to a 6 or 7 maybe. But it did noticeably lessen, and I was able to be mindful through the whole thing and see the pain as pain. It wasn't my pain. It was just pain that was arising because the conditions were right for the pain to arise. The conditions were right because there was not enough Novocaine that was numbing my tooth, the root of my tooth, and the doctor was drilling into it and was causing pain to happen because of him breaking the tooth. And, so the pain was arising because conditions were right for it to arise. And all the while I'm sitting there and I'm relaxing and being mindful and relaxing and lovingly accepting the fact that the pain is there because the pain was there. That's the truth. And there's no way that I could have changed that truth because it was there. That was the truth of the present moment. So what I did, I also radiated loving and kind thoughts to the dentist. He was causing me the pain. He wasn't doing it intentionally. He didn't know. I didn't say anything to him about him causing me the pain. But I sent loving and kind thoughts to him at the same time as well. That also helped to further release any of the tension that was in my mind and my body. And that also helped if the dentist might have unconsciously felt any type of remorse from doing that, because, if he unconsciously somehow knew that he may not have deadened my tooth all the way, that it would have lessened any type of remorse he might have had as well. So that's really one aspect too, also with that, to make sure that you're mindful at all times and not take the nitrous oxide, etc. And then after that was done, the doctor gave me 2 prescriptions, one for antibiotics to lessen infection in the tooth in the area, because after he got through with removing my tooth, he had to suture the area because he cut open my gum. And then the second was a painkiller. I actually refused to take it was a Loratab. I actually refused the prescription for the painkiller because it would affect my mindfulness, but I of course took the antibiotic because that's just common sense. It was going to lessen the possibility of infection in my tooth. That is common sense. You take medications that a doctor prescribes for you if they are meant to help you. And even if a doctor prescribes you painkillers, it's okay for you to take those. You aren't actually breaking a precept by taking them. But if you choose to go to the extent, such as what I do, of that precept with regard to not taking painkillers, then you can do that. Because what I do is I don't take painkillers, and I lovingly accept the pain that's arising because it's there. It's the truth of the present moment that pain is there. I accept that, and I relax into it and allow my natural endorphins to do the work, my body's natural painkillers to do the work there. And another thing with this is that if you take recreational alcohol or drugs, they actually tend to have a long-term effect if you take them over a long amount of time. That can cause you to have a long-term effect with regard to your mindfulness practice and cause a great an incredible hindrance to your meditation progress. And that's also spoken about in the teachings of the Buddha as well. And then, of course, as I said, taking those things cause you to have a greater tendency to break the previous 4 precepts as well. And there are stories all over the place about those things happening. So I won't go into detail about that there. So I'll finish up. That's the teaching on morality. As I said, I'll read a sutta of the Buddha afterwards. Actually, I'll read it now because it is just about morality. And there are two suttas actually that I'll be reading on this. The first one is actually the results of breaking the precepts. The second one will actually be the benefits of following the precepts. Okay. So this is the Vipaka Sutta, results from the Anguttara Nikaya. Monks, the taking of life, when indulged in, developed, and pursued, is something that leads to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal, leads to the realm of the hungry shades. These are hungry ghosts. There's a realm of ghosts where their mouths are actually extremely small and there's no way for them to eat, and they constantly have a feeling of hunger. And that's basically greed, a realm that's a result of greed, because a lot of death and killing is caused by greed, such as people killing and robbing people. The slightest of all the results coming from the taking of life is that when one becomes a human being, it leads to a short lifespan. And basically what that means, if you indulge in harming or killing other living beings, you tend to bring about the karma, the fruit of karma, that you will eventually die a short, violent death yourself. That's what that's really talking about. It's like many people who are warmongers that I'm not going to say necessarily the military personnel in general, but people in the military who actually enjoy the fighting and the killing. They derive joy from the taking of life. They tend to be some of the ones that die the most violent deaths. Not all the time. There are some exceptions to that. But that's typically the fruit of karma from a previous life where they actually enjoyed helping other people. So there are some exceptions to that rule, but typically, you know, that's what happens. A person who indulges in that in some previous lifetime or in some later rebirth or in this current lifetime, they will have a violent death, a very violent death. And one of these is actually a sutta, the final sutta, where Mahamoggallana, one of the Buddha's chief disciples, he was an arahant, but in a previous lifetime, he had actually killed his own parents and made it look like and his parents at the time, they were old and blind, and his wife was tired of having to help take care of them, so she enticed Mahamoggallana in that rebirth. He was someone else. He was a different person, and it was not the time whenever he knew the Buddha. She talked him into taking his parents out of the city and killing them. And so basically his parents were blind, they didn't know what was going on, so he made it seem like his parent, like they were going out somewhere to go do something, and they had been stopped by a bunch of bandits on the road, and they were going to kill them. And they made it sound like the person who was Mahamoggallana in that rebirth, he made it sound like he was trying to fight them off. And his parents said, "Son, run, run. We've lived a good life. We love you. Run and leave us. Let them kill us." And even though Mahamoggallana felt a lot of remorse at that time because his parents were openly willing to give their lives for him because they thought they were being overrun by bandits, he still killed them anyways. And in the lifetime in which he knew the Buddha and had attained arahatship, final and complete enlightenment, he was actually someone who did not like him actually hired a bunch of bandits to attempt to kill him. And this happened over the course of multiple years, where Mahamoggallana, using his supernatural abilities, could see them coming a great distance off and was able to fly. He had the supernatural ability to fly because he was the Buddha's chief disciple that was second to him in mastery of supernatural abilities. So Mahamoggallana was able to get up and fly and outrun these bandits because he lived on the Vulture Peak, and every day whenever he would come down or go back up from his alms round getting food, these bandits would chase him and try to kill him. And so he would fly and would outrun them. But just one day, he saw them coming. He used his supernatural ability to see them coming a long ways off and started to get up to fly to outrun them. And his supernatural abilities just left him. And he actually, while in the middle of flying, he fell down into the middle of all these bandits, and they beat him. They literally beat him. Um, in the text, it says that they beat him to the point where none of his bones were any larger than a Bodhi seed, which is extremely small. It's about the size of a pea. Um, and he was mindful the entire time, and actually, while they were beating him, basically beating him to death, he wondered what happened, what had happened in a previous lifetime to cause this to happen. And he actually looked back in his previous lifetimes and saw the lifetime in which, you know, he had killed his parents. And so once they finished beating him, he was still alive, but just barely, and his supernatural abilities came back to him. And it says that he transported himself to where the Buddha was and told the Buddha everything that had happened. This is why the story was able to be recounted and put in within the Buddhist text. And he thanked the Buddha for showing him the path that led to the liberation of suffering. And then Mahamoggallana transported himself somewhere else and eventually died. That was actually the result. He died a violent death because of the fruit of karma that he developed in a past life from killing his own parents, even though he felt remorse. Which means, you know, how much worse would it be for the fruition of karma of someone who actually enjoyed it? So that's what this is really talking about, and that the Buddha is really against taking of life. There's actually the Vinaya, the rules for Buddhist monks. The Buddha actually talks about, there's actually a Vinaya rule where monks aren't even allowed to exhort people to kill someone or to commit violence, and that's immediate. And if a monk does that, it's immediate expulsion from the Buddhist Sangha, immediately taking of the robes, and they're having to go back to lay life before they were monks. And there's actually a story where a Buddhist monk was teaching a soldier in a kingdom wherever he was at, and told him that if he must kill, to kill compassionately, to feel compassion for the beings that he was killing. And the Buddha heard about this. He immediately went to that monk and disrobed him right then and there and expelled him from the Sangha, because he has zero tolerance for the taking of life, period. Any being, any living being, big or small, except in the necessary means of, bodily functions or parasites that are in your body that you must expel to save your own life. But whenever it comes to killing other people, killing mosquitoes, things of that nature, anything that you can actually expel from you or repel from you without having to kill it, you do that. He has zero tolerance for anything otherwise. Now, stealing, when indulged in, developed, and pursued, is something that leads to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal, leads to the realm of the hungry shades or hungry ghosts. The slightest of all the results coming from stealing is that when one becomes a human being, it leads to the loss of one's wealth. And what this means is basically, if you steal, you will never be prosperous. You will never have any type of money. Anything that you do steal won't last very long. It will leave you. It'll basically dry up. It'll be like, dirt or sand falling through your fingers once you grasp it. That's really what it's talking about, and that's the karma of that. Within this lifetime, as well as within further lifetimes, any lifetime that you were reborn as a human being. So it's talking about you will have a loss of wealth if you steal from others. And I've actually dealt with this myself. There was a time whenever I was younger, in my early teenage years, right after, or my late teenage years and very early 20s, back right after I got out of high school. I was a bit of a kleptomaniac for a while because of certain things that happened to me. I was in the Marine Corps and I didn't finish basic training because of certain issues, and I actually felt a lot of guilt for that. And I basically tried to make myself feel better by getting a rush from taking things from stores or other people. And at the time, first I was caught. I was arrested for taking from a store, and I was not prosperous for very while. I didn't have a job. I could barely keep money down. It took several years for that karma to come to complete fruition and dissipate, to the point where I was able to have any money whatsoever, to the point where I wasn't constantly basically broke all the time. And I'm still dealing with the fruition of that karma to a certain extent, not very much, but I don't live in luxury, but I'm living at the bare minimum of a comfortable financial, material lifestyle. And it could be better, because there are times where it almost feels like I'm not always able to take care of my financial responsibilities. I still do, because that karma is dissipating more and more as I get more into the practice and make sure to follow the precepts as closely as possible. But it is still there to an extent. So I have personal experience with dealing with breaking of that precept too. Now we get to the third one, illicit sexual behavior or sexual misconduct. Illicit sexual behavior, when indulged in, developed, and pursued, is something that leads to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal, leads to the realm of the hungry ghosts. The slightest of all the results coming from illicit sexual behavior is that when one becomes a human being, it leads to rivalry and revenge. That's basically, that's obvious. We see it in movies and TV shows all the time. We see it on the news, where someone catches, their loved one, the person that they loved, their wife, their spouse, wife, husband, whatever, girlfriend, boyfriend, find them cheating on someone, and they kill that person, or they basically cause that other person's life to be miserable, even if they don't kill the person that, they cause their former significant other's life to be miserable, even if they don't actually kill the person that they were sleeping with, or kill their former significant other. But that does happen a lot. They they take revenge against them in some way and make their lives miserable. They either kill their significant other and the person that they were in sexual misconduct with, or they try to make that person's life miserable in some other way. And that causes a lot of suffering, not only to the person who did the sexual misconduct, but the person who is taking it personally and dealing with it too, because of the aversion that they're having in their mind from trying to make their former significant other's life miserable. Now after that, we get to, these are going to be, right here, these are going to be the fourth one. There are four aspects of this. So the first one is telling of falsehoods or lying. Telling falsehoods, when indulged in, developed, and pursued, is something that leads to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal, leads to the realm of the hungry shades. The slightest of all the results coming from telling falsehood is that when one becomes a human being, it leads to being falsely accused. And that means also, too, you tell lies and people know you for telling lies, they lose respect for you. And eventually, once you do tell something that's true, that might mean the potential, saving of someone's life, your own life, someone else's life, nobody may believe you, and it may cause disastrous results. And one thing I can think of is the story of the boy who cries wolf. That he was a shepherd, and he kept, to have something to do and to bring attention to him, he kept crying wolf about his fox, and people would come up to about his wolf trying to kill a sheep, and people would come up trying to hunt for the wolf, and they'd find out that later on he lied. He did that enough times that eventually a wolf did come up and start killing his sheep, and he started crying wolf, and nobody came because they thought he was probably lying, and eventually the boy himself was eaten and killed by the wolf. That's one of those stories that's told to tell a moral, one of the morality tales about lying, and that's what can happen there. And this also happens too. People kind of wonder too sometimes about this. Well, what if telling the truth is going to hurt somebody's feelings? Well, then you try not to say anything. It's better to say, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, because you don't want to lie to the person. But also, whenever it comes to correct speech, you don't want to intentionally say something that you know is going to hurt someone else's feelings. So it's best to not say anything at all. Or, if the person, or you ask the person, well, do you think that you look good in this? And you turn that back on them, because, sometimes the person actually takes a moment to look at it. They might realize, maybe this doesn't look so good on me, or something like that. So they'll eventually figure it out on their own. And if they don't, if they like it, then let them do it. It's not causing harm to them. Other people might not like it. There might eventually be somebody that, comes up to them and, says, hey, that's horrible or whatever. But at least you didn't say anything. And they can't come back to you later on saying, well, why did you say I look good in this? Because I'll do that all the time. If someone asks me, I'll say, well, how do you think that looks good on you? They're like, well, I think it looks great. So, well, then that's really all that matters. My opinion doesn't. And some people do get aggravated with that, but if it looks good, sometimes I will say that. Other times I won't, because I don't want them to come back and automatically always think that if I say, well, how does that look good on you? If you think it looks good, then that's really all that matters. Then them automatically think that I think it looks bad, because I try not to keep an opinion with that. Of course, it happens and I make judgments because I'm not perfect. But I try to let the person have the subject, have the opinion for that. And that's really the opinion that matters. If they think they look good in on, then, who cares? Okay, so we get out of telling falsehoods, we get to divisive tale-bearing. This is basically what I talked about, slander, trying to get other groups of people to not like each other, or to divide groups of people. Divisive tale-bearing, when indulged in, developed, and pursued, is something that leads to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal, leads to the realm of the hungry shades. The slightest of all the results coming from divisive tale-bearing is that when one becomes a human being, it leads to the breaking of one's friendships. And that's basically what happens. Eventually, the truth's going to come out, and they will find out that you were doing all of that lying to try to get them to split up. And guess what? They aren't going to like you either, and they're going to leave you as friends. Even if they don't like each other and no longer are friends, they aren't going to keep you as a friend. None of them probably will. Now, after that, we get to harsh speech. This is any type of harsh speech, calling people names, cursing, anything like that. Harsh speech, when indulged in, developed, and pursued, is something that leads to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal, leads to the realm of the hungry shades. The slightest of all the results coming from harsh speech is that when one becomes a human being, it leads to unappealing sounds. And that's basically, harsh speech. People, if you curse or call people names a lot, the only people you'll attract to you is people who do that as well, because they don't care, because they do it themselves. Many people, they actually don't like harsh speech of any sort. They don't like to constantly be called names or constantly be, hear cursing. And I know, especially within some traditions, that, we're trying to get over that whole idea of being appalled by that. But it still is the fact that, people don't like it. So if those people, so why do it in the first place? Because it's causing aversion in your mind and causing a hindrance to your own progress. So who cares whether or not somebody else, whether or not you're trying to get somebody else over not liking it? You need to get over not liking not doing it. Because if you do it yourself, it's only causing harm to yourself as well as other people. So that's what that's really dealing with, and it leads to a fruition of karma later on. Frivolous chattering. This is basically, the word just got out of my head. I just forgot it. Frivolous chattering. Well, it's basically any type of frivolous speech, anything that might possibly be untrue as well, that you're just idly talking to people. Gossip, there's the word. That's the word I was trying to think about that just got out of my head. Sometimes it's hard for me to think of those words, even if I've spoken about them earlier. Yeah, frivolous chattering is basically gossip. Frivolous chattering, when indulged in, developed, and pursued, is something that leads to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal, leads to the realm of the hungry shades. The slightest of all the results coming from frivolous chattering is that when one becomes a human being, it leads to words that aren't worth taking to heart. And basically what this means, let me get to this part here, the slightest of all the results. This is basically the least that could happen. The worst that can happen is if you go to that you could go to a hell realm. The least negative result is that you're reborn as a human being, or within this current human lifetime, these results happen. And with this one is, it leads to words that aren't worth taking to heart. Basically, if you become known as a gossip, nobody's going to listen to you. People will know you as a gossip, and you come up and try to say something, they'll either immediately walk away, or they'll kind of just brush off whatever you're saying. They won't even really listen to you too much. And this happened, I know of a story where there was a monastery where there was this nun, and she was known as a gossip. A Buddhist nun, she was known as a gossip, and people knew of her as a gossip. And so eventually she'd just start coming up and talking to people, and she would actually, whenever she would come up and talk to people, they would just immediately walk away. They wouldn't even bother listening to her. None of the monks or nuns that were at the monastery would even bother hearing what she had to say, because they knew of her as a gossip, and they did not want to end up developing that mindset from speaking to her, and end up breaking this precept as well. And eventually she got the hint and stopped it. And that's basically what they were trying to do. So after we get to frivolous chattering, okay, telling of falsehoods, divisive tale-bearing, harsh speech, frivolous chattering. Those are all part of intentionally lying, using harsh and divisive speech. Now we get down to the final precept, which is drinking drugs and alcohol, which lead to a lack of mindfulness. The drinking of fermented and distilled liquors, when indulged in, developed, and pursued, is something that leads to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal, leads to the realm of the hungry shades. The slightest or the least of all the results coming from drinking fermented and distilled liquors is that when one becomes a human being, it leads to mental derangement. Basically what that means is that you have a dull mind. And you'll know of people, you've probably heard things about people whenever they're drunk, they do really ignorant things. They get angry. They decide they're going to jump off buildings, any number of things. They decide to try to drive a car and get into car accidents and end up killing people. All sorts of things that are basically lacking in common sense. They do these things, and that's what mental derangement is dealing with. People don't have the mindfulness, and over time, over long-term use, they could develop to a long-term lack of mindfulness, so that even if you eventually stop drinking alcohol, you'll have a lot of trouble, a lot of slow progress in your meditation until you get over that dullness of mind. That doesn't mean that if you take to heart what I'm saying here and decide to and want to practice the precepts to the letter, that you aren't going to get any progress, so why even bother? It just means that for a time, until you get over the dullness of mind that was developed from the alcohol, from you having long-term use of alcohol or drugs, you're just going to have a bit slower progress, and you might deal with bad meditation for a little while. So basically, whenever you do that, you just take a while until you can get past it. You just meditate for only like maybe 30 minutes a day or something like that. And then once that gets easier, and you're able to either not have the dull mind or have a restless or agitated mind, that you start increasing your time in meditation over time. And then that's whenever you're starting to get progress, and it'll be slow and difficult, probably a bit longer than people who might have been practicing precepts for longer, not drinking alcohol as much, what have you. So it might be a bit slower in the beginning, but that means once you've gotten over that hurdle, it will start to pick up, and you'll have just as much the potential for speedy progress as anybody else. So yeah, those are the results of breaking the precepts here. Now what we're going to get to is the results of observing the precepts. These are the good results. This is the Abhisanda Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya. This actually comes immediately before the last one that I talked about, but I wanted to do this one last because now you know the proper benefits after having heard the negative benefits. This is the Abhisanda Sutta rewards. Monks, there are these 8 rewards of merit, rewards of skillfulness, nourishments of happiness, celestial results in happiness, leading to heaven, leading to what is desirable, pleasurable and appealing to welfare and happiness. Which 8? There is a case where the disciple of the noble ones has gone to the Buddha for refuge. This is the first reward of merit, reward of skillfulness, nourishment of happiness, celestial result in happiness, leading to heaven, leading to what is desirable, pleasurable and appealing to welfare and to happiness. Furthermore, the disciple of the noble ones has gone to the Dhamma for refuge. This is the second reward of merit. Furthermore, the disciple of the noble ones has gone to the Sangha for refuge. This is the third reward of merit. Now, these rewards of merit, most of you who might be actually listening to this talk right now have no doubt probably been Buddhist for a little while. If you haven't and you're new to Buddhism, you might have looked this up already. But going to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha for refuge, that's part of the Buddhist practice once you try to actually follow the Buddhist practice wholeheartedly and sincerely. You take the 5 precepts and you observe the 3 refuges. And this means giving reverence to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and going to them for refuge. You go to refuge to the Buddha because we're in the current dispensation of the Buddha at the time. So going to the Buddha for refuge means you accept the teachings of the Buddha. And then you go to the Dhamma for refuge. That's the truth that was brought about by the teachings of Buddha, the fundamental principles of Buddhism, the 4 Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the 3 trainings that I'm talking about here, etc. Then you go to the Sangha for refuge, and that basically means some people think it's the Sangha of Buddhist monks, but it's actually the spiritual community as a whole. It could mean the spiritual community as a whole, and the context of where the 3 refuges, this is actually talking about the Sangha of the noble ones. These are the beings who have actually attained enlightenment within their own current lifetimes. Right now, within this current lifetime in which we're living, as well as previous lifetimes back in the past. So that's what this is talking about. You go to the Sangha of enlightened ones for refuge, because these are the beings that understand through direct knowledge and experience the teachings of the Buddha and the fundamental principles that are brought about by the Buddhist teachings. Now there are these 5 gifts, 5 great gifts: original, long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated from the beginning, that are not open to suspicion, will never be open to suspicion, and are unfaulted by knowledgeable contemplatives and Brahmins. Which 5? Now this is talking about the rewards of practicing the precepts, the 5 rewards. There's a case where a disciple of the noble ones, abandoning the taking of life, abstains from taking life. In doing so, he gives freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. In giving freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings, he gains a share in limitless freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, and freedom from oppression. This is the first great gift. The first great gift: original, long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated from the beginning. That is not open to suspicion, will never be open to suspicion, and is unfaulted by knowledge, contemplatives, and Brahmins. This is the 4th reward of merit. What this is talking about is with the killing of living beings, with refraining from killing living beings, eventually you'll develop the fruition of karma, where you will live a long life. You won't be in fear of having a violent death, and you also eventually won't have an underlying fear whenever you're out alone or things like that, because a lot of people are afraid of being at a house alone, and they have an underlying fear of being attacked, things like that. That typically comes from fruition of karma in this lifetime or in a previous lifetime of constantly killing living beings or harming living beings. Furthermore, abandoning taking that which is not given, or stealing, the disciple of the noble ones abstains from taking that which is not given. In doing so, he gives freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. He gives him freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. He gains a share in limitless freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, and freedom from oppression. This is the second great gift. This is the 5th reward of merit. And this talks about, of course, that you'll live a long life as well. You won't be afraid of people stealing from you because you haven't stolen from anyone else. You eventually will be able to basically keep any wealth that you might have. This doesn't talk about the extent of greediness, but be you won't be afraid of not taking care of your financial responsibilities or being able to take care of basically anything that allows your life to sustain you, such as having a roof over your head, food in your belly, etc. Furthermore, the abandoning of illicit sex or sexual misconduct, the disciple of the noble ones abstains from illicit sex. In doing so, he gives freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. In giving freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings, he gains a share in limitless freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, and freedom from oppression. This is the third gift, the third great gift, and this is the sixth reward of merit. And this talks about too. Now the same text is being used in all of these. It's repeating, but it means something different in each of them based upon the context of the merit that he's talking about. And with this, it means that if you refrain from sexual misconduct, no sexual, eventually the fruition of karma will happen that you won't have sexual misconduct happen to you. You won't be raped. In another lifetime as a child, you won't be molested. Things of that nature. You won't have your spouse cheat on you. All of those things. That's what that's talking about. Furthermore, abandoning lying, and this is meaning any type of intentionally lying or using harsh and device speech. It's just abridged here to just say lying. But furthermore, abandoning lying, the disciple of the noble ones abstains from lying. In doing so, he gives freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. In giving freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings, he gains a share in limitless freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression. This is the fourth gift, the fourth great gift, and this is the seventh reward of merit. Now, what he's talking about here is that you abandon lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, slander, then you won't have those things happen to you. People won't falsely accuse you of things if you are telling the truth. People won't use harsh speech against you. They won't try to divide you from other people. They won't slander you. Now, furthermore, abandoning the use of intoxicants. This is intoxicating drinks and drugs which lead to a lack of mindfulness. Furthermore, abandoning the use of intoxicants. The disciple of the noble ones abstains from taking intoxicants. In doing so, he gives freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. In giving freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings, he gains a share in limitless freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression. This is the fifth gift, the fifth great gift. Original, long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated from the beginning, that is not open to suspicion, will never be open to suspicion, and is unfaulted by knowledge, knowledgeable contemplatives and Brahmins. And this is the eighth reward of merit, reward of skillfulness, nourishment of happiness, celestial, resulting in happiness, leading to heaven, leading to what is desirable, pleasurable, and appealing, to welfare and to happiness. And this is talking about here that if you follow these, you can't be faulted by other knowledgeable people, such as other people who are following the path, as being someone who is not following the path, basically, because you're following these precepts. So people can't fault you from that. They can't really find fault in what you're doing. And of course, not everybody's going to be perfect unless you're a fully enlightened being, because after you've attained the fruition of the first level of enlightenment, you actually wouldn't be able to break any of these precepts to begin with. But while you're on the path before attaining that fruition of the first of the four stages of enlightenment, it's still possible for you to break these. So you do everything you can to not break these, and and once you do that, people can't find fault in what you're doing. And this leads to happiness to not only yourself but to other beings as well. So it starts your basically your testimony of following the Buddhist path and being considered that. And there's actually a story about that. I do everything I can to follow all 5 of the precepts to the letter without breaking them. Of course, I'm not perfect, and it happens from time to time. but I'm actually known very much by, being the calm in the midst of the storm, so to speak, in some of our busiest times at the grocery store I work at. And there was one time where a young Christian guy came up to me, and he had been learning about other religions. He'd been taking a religion class, and he actually walked up to me after getting to know me for several months and said, "Are you Buddhist?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am. How did you figure that out?" And he said, "Well, it's just how you act. You are really calm all the time, and in the busiest times that we'll have at the store here, you're just like sitting there, the calm in front of the storm. I can just look at you and feel a lot more calm." And and he's like, "I'm a Christian, and I read the teachings of Jesus, and most of the Buddhists I've met, they've been bigger followers of what Jesus taught than most Christians are. And I've actually read about the Buddha, and that's how he was. They're big testimonies for the Buddha, and I just automatically knew whenever I saw you and been watching you for a while that you just had to be Buddhist." And that was actually one of those times where I rarely ever speak about my spiritual practice, about being Buddhist, unless people ask me. I have a tattoo on my arm here. Let me see if I can get it in the thing a little bit there. That's about as best as I can probably get it. That is the word. It's both Pali and Sanskrit. That is the word for is karuna, which means compassion. And I didn't have this whenever that guy had actually talked to me and asked me whether or not I was Buddhist. I got it much later. And primarily it's for me because whenever I'm looking at, whenever I'm doing my job, I do my job with my hands a lot. And part of my uniform is actually a short sleeve button up shirt. And so I'm doing a lot of things with my hands, and I'm constantly looking down at them to scanning items, helping a customer look for an item, etc. And so I look down at my arm and I see that, and I know what the word means. I know that, this language, the Devanagari script, it says the word is karuna. It translates into English as compassion, and I know what compassion means. A good definition for compassion that I was taught is seeing another person in pain or suffering, giving the person the space to feel that pain and suffering, and still loving them anyway. And so that's what I do whenever I see people who are, getting aggravated, agitated. I give them the space to feel that pain, and I send them loving and kind thoughts regardless. And so that's for me, that's a real big reminder for me, having that tattoo right there, that it helps me to remember to be compassionate at all times. And so a lot of the time people will see that, and then it will get into a conversation about my practice, but I rarely ever actually talk about it. And people who don't see that, especially people who are really aware, they tend to talk about how, I'm really like that. And I'm like, yeah, well, I appreciate that. I do my best to be that way. And a lot of people who are really Christian, they think that I'm, some sort of uber Christian guy who's like following Jesus's teachings to the letter. And I'm like, no, actually I'm Buddhist, and these are the Buddhist teachings as well. And it kind of gets into a discourse sometimes that opens up that person's mind that, hey, maybe not all religions are just so black and white and are so different. Maybe some of them basically do teach some of the same things. So that's, really this helps to basically open up a door for you to speak to people and to open people's minds a little bit as well through your morality practice. And now that's going to be the end of the teaching on Sila. As I said, I'm almost an hour and a half into this, and that's the first of the 3 trainings. The other 2 will actually be a bit won't be as lengthy, so you don't have to worry about this turning into a 5-hour talk or anything like that. So what I'm going to get into after this is dana. The word for dana is the word dana translated into English is generosity. And most people, whenever they think of generosity, automatically think that somebody's trying to get them to open up their wallet to give them money, or their checkbook to give them money. And generosity doesn't necessarily just mean that. Generosity is generosity of body, speech, and mind. So giving of your body is not just giving of money. Giving of your body could also be giving of your time to help people. You could be helping someone build a house, take out the trash. You see someone walking down the road and you feel comfortable enough, you offer them a ride to wherever they're going, not because you think they'll give you any type of reward, but because they'll because you want to. You want to be generous and provide a service to that person, be of service to them. And that does mean giving money, of course, but it means all that. You can give people food. The Buddha actually said one of the best ways to be generous to people is to give food. Another way is to give merit, such as at the end of this talk, I'll be sharing the merit that we both gained from me from giving this talk and you from listening to it. That's one way of being generous. So that's what we're really dealing with here, is that. And then mindfulness of speech, or generosity of speech. Generosity of speech is giving loving and kind speech to people. That's the opposite of harsh and divisive speech, as in the 5 precepts on the teaching on morality. You give kind words to people. You give them kind speech. If you find ways to talk to people that are uplifting, and do your best to only give uplifting speech to people to make them feel happy and to ease their suffering in any way. You don't lie whenever you do this. You speak the truth, but do so in a way that either might be critiquing someone but makes them take it in a positive way, or you do something that compliments someone that is actually truthful. Something of that nature. Now that's what speech is about. Now mind, that is giving kind and loving thoughts to people, such as what I talked about earlier, giving loving and kind thoughts to the dentist who was drilling into my tooth and I could feel the tooth being broken apart. Giving loving and kind thoughts to the disgruntled customers, all of those things. You give loving and kind thoughts to all beings. That's actually what I do for my metta or loving kindness meditation. That is the bulk of my daily meditation practice whenever I'm sitting in meditation, as well as out in the world. That's primarily what I do. Now, so that's really what generosity is all about. And this is an extension of morality, because being generous, the Buddha also said one of the best ways to be generous is to give someone their life. And now how do you do that? You can find a being that you know is going to be killed and then release them, such as an animal. Such as like where I live, I'm in a beach resort town. I can go to a bait shop where they sell live fish to be used as bait, and I can buy a bunch of them and release them back out into the ocean. Of course, eventually, with nature taking its place, they might be eaten, but I'm giving them a chance, whereas if they stay there, they're definitely going to be killed because they're going to be used by fishermen, speared on the hook, and then fed to catch a bigger fish. So basically, I'm giving back life to those fish so they can have a fighting chance out in the wild, and let nature take its course as opposed to an imminent death at the bait shop. If I were living up in Maine or something, what I would really like to do, because we sell Maine lobster in the seafood department at the grocery store I work at, I would love to be able to get some of those lobster and release them out to the wild. But it would be inevitable that they would actually die in the warm waters here because they're from up north in the cold waters, from very cold waters. And then, of course, they aren't indigenous to this area, so it might be hard for them to find food and all that stuff, even if they were able to live in the water. But like in many of the Asian cities where they have open markets and they sell chicken to be slaughtered, you say, hey, I want that chicken, and they'll kill the chicken for you. You can actually buy chicken live and then release them back out into the wild. And those are really good ways to generate generosity and to also negate any of the bad karma you've done from breaking the precepts. Now, this is not something that you just keep doing, because it's the intention behind your breaking of the precepts and your intention behind releasing that being and giving it back its life that depends upon your karma. So you can't just go and say, well, I'll break these precepts, but, I'll go, release some fish back out into the wild, from a bait shop, and that'll take care of that, so I don't really have to worry about it, because that will actually negate any type of karma you would get from releasing the fish out into the wild, because you're doing it for selfish means. So you have to truly, if you break a precept, such as you kill another living being, and but you're like, you really do, are remorseful for it, so you retake the precepts, and then you go find living beings and release them out to the wild, and you release the guilt of breaking that precept with them. You intentionally did it out of a feeling of generosity and to release your guilt, and then that is what helps to negate the karma of breaking that precept. So that's really the process of generosity, the training of generosity. As I said, not very long. Now the third aspect, the third training that we get to is Bhavana, which is mental development, and this is your meditation practice. And this is going to be a bit longer than generosity, but nowhere near as long as morality. With your mental development, you do this on the meditation cushion wherever you sit to meditate, because that is a way for you to get a deeper understanding of the fundamental principles that the Buddha taught. This is the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination, which I'll get into in a later talk. But you are supposed to also try to do this as you're out in your daily life, wherever you go as well. So you're developing your mind at all times. This becomes an active lifestyle, as opposed to just something you do in the privacy of your own home. This is how it benefits all other beings, out in the world, by you doing what you do. And with that, I'm going to talk from the Anapanasati Sutta. And I'm going to, this is about the mindfulness of breathing. This is the basic teaching of the principle of the teaching, but this is something that can be applied to all meditation objects, not just your breath. Okay, and I'll actually expound on that a little bit inside of the sutta. Now, and I'm getting about halfway down. I'm not starting at the very beginning because this is a somewhat lengthy sutta. So I will actually be, actually no, this isn't, yeah, this is a bit long, so I'm going to start with the mindfulness of in and out breathing, because some of the things at the beginning, that's not really very pertinent to what's being talked about. Sort of an introduction here. Mindfulness of in and out breathing, when developed and pursued, is of great fruit, of great benefit. Mindfulness of in and out breathing, when developed and pursued, brings the four frames of reference to their culmination. The four frames of reference, when developed and pursued, bring the seven factors of awakening to their culmination. The seven factors of awakening, when developed and pursued, bring clear knowing and release to their culmination. Now, what those are talking about, the four frames of reference, those are the four foundations of mindfulness. I talked about them in my first talk about the Four Noble Truths whenever we came down to the Noble Eightfold Path. The seven factors of enlightenment, are they're another aspect. They'll actually be talked about later on down here, so I won't get into those into detail right now, because they're talked about in detail closer to the end. I'll be actually going down to throughout the rest of the sutta to the end, from where I'm at right now. This is about halfway into it. Mindfulness of in and out breathing. Now, how is mindfulness of in and out breathing developed and pursued so as to be of great fruit, of great benefit? There's the case where the monk, having gone to the wilderness, and now with this, the Buddha is actually talking to the Sangha of monks, but this could be anybody, so you could actually say there's the case for a meditator, or contemplative, as they're called within the Buddhist text. And and they say, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, sits down, folding his legs crosswise, holding his body erect, and saying mindfulness to the four. This means you bring mindfulness up in your mind, and you make the determination to spend your time meditating to develop mindfulness. Always mindfully breathes in, mindfully he breathes out. Now, of course, he's talking to monks, so this could mean he or she. He's just saying he at the time because he's talking to a group of men. And so you don't always have to go to these particular places. He says going to an empty building. This basically means a private place, like where the room that I'm in right now is mine and my wife's office in our apartment, and this is a secondary bedroom, and we have a closet in here. I actually have a corner of the closet, the walk-in closet, set up where I have a folding meditation chair that I use. and that's my private place to do my private sitting meditation. So this basically means any private space that you choose to use for your meditation time. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. If you're in a busy area and you're just sitting waiting for someone, you can spend your time meditating. Then I do that a lot, especially if I go traveling or something, or traveling on a plane and we're having to wait 15, 20, 30 minutes or whatever for a plane. I'll kind of sit there and meditate. Or if I'm in a waiting room having to wait to see the doctor for checkups, what have you, I'll sit there and spend some time meditating too. Now then we get to the actual teaching of the aspect. Breathing in long, he discerns I am breathing in long. Or breathing out long, he discerns I am breathing out long. Or breathing in short, he discerns I am breathing in short. Or breathing out short, he discerns I am breathing out short. He trains himself, I will breathe in sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself, I will breathe out sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself, I will breathe in calming bodily fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out calming bodily fabrication. Last part, I'll breathe in and out calming bodily fabrication. This is also translated sometimes. I'll breathe in tranquilizing the bodily formations, or I will breathe out tranquilizing the bodily formations as well. Basically, the first part of this means you're mindful of your breath. You know what your breath is doing at the time. You know you're breathing in or breathing out long, breathing in or breathing out short, etc. This does not mean you're focusing on your breath to the exclusion of everything else. You just know what your breath is doing, how you're breathing. Let's see here. Let me find out. I just lost my place, so I had to get back to it. Okay. Now with this last part here, I'll breathe in and out sensitive to the entire body. That means you're just aware of what your body's doing. If your body's tense, you know it's tense. If there's a sensation in your body, you know there's a sensation in your body. Now this last part is very important, and this is a part that gets left out of a lot of meditation. And what this is talking about, I will breathe in or I will breathe out calming the bodily fabrication, or as it's translated sometimes tranquilizing the bodily formations. This actually means you're relaxing. Every time you breathe in, you relax. Every time you breathe out, you relax. And this means your entire body, from the top of your head to the soles of your tips of your toes and the soles of your feet. And this is a very important thing that gets left out. This is actually the difference between mindfulness meditation and concentration meditation, which is what most people teach. This is forgotten a lot and is glossed over, or people say it means that you're focusing on being tranquil. But the word for tranquilize in this is pasambaya. And with that, pasambaya can be an adjective, an adverb, a noun, or a pronoun. Or not a pronoun, but a noun, a verb, or an adjective. And it depends on what comes before it, the context, as to what it will be. And whenever it says he trains himself, I will breathe in, calming the bodily fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out, calming the bodily fabrication. All of that before it turns this into an action. It is a verb. It is something that is meant to be done. So it is not a state of mind that you're trying to do. It is something physical. You're trying to relax your mind and your body. And so this, whenever you're sensing you're sensitive to your entire body, you're mindful of what your body is doing. You feel tension, you relax that tension. You feel tightness in your mind, you relax your mind. And that's what this is doing, and that is actually the big difference here. And that's what brings us to mindfulness meditation, that actually brings you the path that leads to liberation or to enlightenment. And that's what this is talking about here. He trains himself, I will breathe in sensitive to rapture. He trains himself, I will breathe out sensitive to rapture. And this means basically joy. And we get through this. He trains himself, I will breathe in sensitive to pleasure. He trains himself, I will breathe out sensitive to pleasure. He trains himself, I will breathe in sensitive to mental fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out sensitive to mental fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe in calming mental fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out calming mental fabrication. And basically what this means is that you're aware of states in your body, emotions that come up, joy and rapture, pleasure. Those are actual states of mind that will come up as you progress in your meditation. There's certain levels of meditative awareness, so you're aware of whenever they come up. You're aware of whenever you start to feel joy, or you're aware of whenever you start to feel a calmness and a pleasure in your mind and body, and a comfortableness in your mind and body. And that is basically happiness. And that's what the Buddha terms as happiness. And there are certain meditative levels. I'll get into those later on, but it's not necessary at this time for what I'm talking about here. And that whenever you train yourself, you breathe out sensitive mental fabrication, you are aware of the thoughts of your mind. And whenever you breathe in and out calming them, when it talks about at the end, that's basically the calming and the tranquilizing, the relaxation of mind and body. And what that does, it actually helps you to release those thoughts that you're having that might be pulling you away from your meditation object, and allows you to come back to your meditation object, either the breath as it's talking about here, or a feeling of loving and kind thoughts to yourself or all beings, something like that. He trains himself, I will breathe in sensitive to mind. He trains himself, I will breathe out sensitive to mind. He trains himself, I will breathe in satisfying the mind. He trains himself, I will breathe out satisfying the mind. He trains himself, I will breathe in steadying the mind. He trains himself, I will breathe out steadying the mind. He trains himself, I will breathe in releasing the mind. He trains himself, I will breathe out releasing the mind. And now what this is talking about here, this is talking about levels of meditative awareness. They're known as jhanas. And now in some commentaries you might read about, they say that jhanas are only meant as concentration stages of meditation, but that's actually not true. And the commentaries that they talk about based upon the Buddha's teachings, many of these people who wrote these commentaries were scholars, and they never actually studied the Buddha's meditation. They never actually practiced the meditation itself. They only studied it. And so they didn't understand the meaning between concentration and samadhi, or tranquil wisdom, or insight meditation that the Buddha taught. And so they actually chose to differentiate between the two. And they kind of misrepresented the differentiation, thinking that jhanas were about concentration. But in each of the different meditations, concentration meditation is one thing and samadhi meditation is something else. And there are jhanas within each of them. But those jhanas lead to different results. Concentration meditation only leads up to a certain point, and it doesn't lead you to enlightenment, whereas insight or samadhi meditation does. But they have the same jhanas up to a certain point, and then there are other jhanas in the samadhi meditation, the insight meditation, that goes beyond the concentration meditation that leads you to enlightenment. And that's what the Buddha is talking about here, because you breathe in sensitive to the mind, and you satisfy the mind, and you steady the mind, and then you release the mind, and those are certain levels of meditative awareness. They're known as arupa jhanas. And that's where you start getting to the arupa jhanas anyways. He trains himself, I'll breathe in, focusing on inconstancy. That means impermanence. He trains himself, I'll breathe out, focusing on constancy. He trains himself, I'll breathe in, focusing on dispassion, or literally fading. He trains himself, I'll breathe out, focusing on dispassion. He trains himself, I'll breathe in, focusing on cessation. He trains himself, I'll breathe out, focusing on cessation. He trains himself, I'll breathe in, focusing on relinquishment. He trains himself, I'll breathe out, focusing on relinquishment. And actually, this is where you start getting to the arupa jhanas, or the levels that go beyond concentration meditation. And relinquishment, that is actually nibbana. Now, you don't make yourself go to these points. They naturally come up. But once you get to those points, you're aware of what those areas are. And that's what this is talking about here. This is how mindfulness of in and out breathing is developed and pursued so as to be of great fruit and of great benefit. Now, I was actually going to go down to some of these other points, but I'm getting into almost 2 hours on this talk, and so those will take a bit longer. So I won't actually go into those. I'll go into those at a later time. But this is basically, that's mental development in a nutshell right there, what the Buddha talks about. And just so you know, it's not just my own words talking about that. I give you a bit of commentary about what some of those things are supposed to mean. But yeah, that's Bhavana, or mental development. And the best way to really understand what the Buddha is talking about there is to actually do the practice. So how do you do the practice? And I will actually focus on the mindfulness of breathing, because that's what we just talked about. With the mindfulness of breathing, you sit down and you start breathing in and out. And you close your eyes and you breathe in and out. You don't try to intentionally breathe in a certain manner, you just naturally breathe. And you just are aware of what your breath is doing, whether you're breathing shallow or you're breathing deep, or you're breathing coarse or fine breath, something like that, if your breath is fast or slow, and you're aware of what it's doing. And whenever you breathe in, you relax your mind and body. And whenever you breathe out, you relax your mind and body. And if a thought comes up that distracts you from your meditation object, which is your breath and relaxing on the in and out breath, there are the 6 R's, and I talked about them in my first talk. I'll restate them now. First, you recognize the thought, that the thought has distracted you. You release that thought. You just let it go. And basically the concept of this is, if someone threw a ball to you, you caught the ball and then you immediately dropped it. Basically, it's like this. I have this pen here. I throw this pen, I drop it. Basically, that's what it is. That's how you release the thought. The pen was the thought. It got carried away, and I caught it. I realized what I'd caught, and then I immediately dropped the pen, and I dropped the thought. It might still be there, but I'm not focusing on it too much. So I've recognized and I've released the thought. Then I relax my mind and body. Okay, you relax your mind and body. Now, how do you relax your mind? Well, there is a membrane around your mind called the meninges. And whenever you have a discursive thought, something dealing with craving and attachment, that meninges, that membrane, actually tightens around your mind. And that's what causes the craving and the tension that were talked about earlier, about the pain and how it keeps the pineal gland from releasing endorphins. And so you relax your mind and body. And how you do that? It's like you have a fist here. I'm being really tight. My fist is shaking because I'm trying to, close it so tight, and then I just release it. And now that tightness goes away. I'm relaxing it, And now I've gotten it as bad as, I've let it go as much as I can physically, but it's still relaxing because I'm just hand relax. And that's kind of what you do. You you breathe in, and then the same way that you would work to relax your mind and your body, because most people think of their body from the neck down, but your body is actually from the top of your head down. This is part of your physical body here too. It's not just part of your mind. This is part of your body too. And so you do the same concept as if you're breathing in, relaxing your body from the neck down. You do that and relax from the top of your head down. And you will actually feel it. You will feel a huge release whenever that happens. Now, the first few times it may not be as noticeable, but after that you will really start, once you get used to the feeling, you'll start to feel it really well, especially if it was a really major thought that distracted you. And that's how you release your mind and your body. And it's basically also a concept similar to a lotus blossom unfolding. And that's actually where the concept of the lotus blossom came into Buddhism, because that's how you're supposed to visualize your mind relaxing during your meditation, is like the blooming of a lotus blossom. And so you can use that concept as well, of a lotus blossom blooming. And so we've talked about recognizing, releasing, and relaxing. And now what do? You re-smile, because while you're meditating, you're smiling, because it helps you to be relaxed. Because the Buddha said that we're, in the Dhammapada, the Buddha said that we are the happy ones. And what's an open expression, an outward expression of happiness? That's smiling. So that's what you do. You smile during your meditation time. It's not got to be a big cheesy grin like this. It can just be a small smile like this, just where the corners of your mouth are lifted up. And so you recognize the distracting thought, you release the distracting thought, you relax your mind and your body, you re-smile, then you return to your meditation object. That's number 5. You return to your meditation object. That's either the breath, is what we've been talking about, or feelings of loving kindness, feelings and thoughts of loving and kind thoughts to yourself or others, which is what I use in metta meditation, whatever your meditation object is. So you return to it. That's number 5 of the 6 R's. And then the 6 R is you repeat the process as necessary. You don't keep repeating this process unless it's necessary. You go through that whole method for each thought that comes up and distracts you from your meditation object. While you're meditating, you might have thoughts that come up and you recognize those thoughts, but they don't distract you. Don't worry about them. They're like clouds passing through the sky. You just let them do their thing and let them go. Eventually they'll dissipate. And with major thoughts, they might come up a few times. It's not the same thought. It's a completely different thought, on the similar subject. So you do the same thing. You go through the 6 R's again. And that's actually right effort. That's harmonious practice, as I talked about in the previous talk about the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. That's how you get through your meditation. You keep doing that as necessary for however long you do it. Recommended minimum time of daily meditation like that is 30 minutes. You can go for as long as you're able to. I've known of some people to do for 4 hours or more during the day, not just monks, housewives, whatever. They can do it for up to 4 hours. They're really advanced meditators. So just however long you can do, and that's basically mental development itself. So we've talked about all of the 3 trainings. This was a very long talk because morality is a very big issue, and if you don't have the morality practice, then you can't really do the other trainings either, because you can't be an immorally generous person or someone who's immoral and have high mental development through meditation. But you can be a very mentally undeveloped person and have high morality and eventually develop your mind very well. You can also be, you can't be someone who's stingy and do morality. You learn morality through and are generous, or you're generous and you have morality. So that's why we took so long on the morality practice. So that's the end of the talk, and so we'll go ahead and share the merit now. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share the merit we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.